Senate Judiciary Committee excuse me, will come to order, and I thank the witnesses for attending. A couple things I'd like to mention at the outset. First, we're all grieving with Senator Dianne Feinstein, who lost her husband, Richard Blum, Sunday night to cancer. It was a heroic battle for many years. He was an extraordinary person, certainly a success in business, but took his wealth and used it to help others in a dramatic fashion. He was particularly smitten with the Himalayas and Dalai Lama, and he created a Himalayan foundation to try to spare some of the people who live in that region the worst aspects of poverty. Richard was an exceptional man, and I know that Senator Feinstein is sad, as she should be, but we are happy to have known him and to have seen his vision of the world. Secondly, as everyone knows, I'm sure President Biden announced his Supreme Court nominee last Friday. We submitted the Senate Judiciary Committee questionnaire to her and received the response last night. It's a lengthy questionnaire. It includes reference to 578 opinions that she handed down on the D.C. District Court. It's an ample display of her jurisprudence and her philosophy, which all members now have a chance to look at again in detail. We last considered her less than a year ago in the same committee for the circuit court position. And having said that, I'll read the opening statement for this hearing and thank all the witnesses for being here. Today, our committee is going to consider how the federal government can help prevent and respond to the surge in carjacking. So carjacking is a scourge. To be sitting in your car with your family and have a person stick a gun in your face and force you to get out so they can steal the car. That's a situation no American should have to face. Sheriff Tom Dart is here from Cook County. He's read the stories that I read regularly. One time, a young man, very young, with a gun, got in a car and forced the driver out and drove away with the car. He was stopped. He was 11 years old. 11. This sort of thing is incredible. Experts have pointed to a number of factors that may have contributed to the increase in violent crime, including economic and social disruption by the pandemic and a large increase in firearm sales. But there is no evidence, none, that an increase in carjacking is due to any specific administration policy or due to bipartisan criminal justice reform legislation signed into law by President Donald Trump. In fact, of 9,000 individuals released to home confinement under the CARES Act, only 8 have been returned to prison for committing a new crime, and only 1 for committing a violent crime. Let me be clear, the increase in carjacking started during the last administration and continues in this administration. It is impacting communities led by both Democratic and Republican elected officials. It is not a red problem, not a blue problem, it's an American problem. I've reached across the aisle to work on bipartisan solutions to protect the American people, like the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization, and I hope we can do that again on this issue. It's important to note that preventing and prosecuting violent crime is primarily a state and local responsibility, but there is an important role for the federal government. First, we need more information on the prevalence of this crime. We can't solve the problem if we don't understand it. That's why I've called for the FBI and Justice Department to begin nationwide data collection on carjacking. Last December, I held a Judiciary Committee field hearing in Chicago on preventing violent crime. I heard from U.S. Attorney John Losh, who is a holdover from the previous administration, about some of the challenges in bringing federal carjacking cases. Senator Grassley and I are working on bipartisan legislation to address it. But as we've learned in the so-called war on drugs, you can't incarcerate your way out of the problem. One important step may involve the auto industry to collaborate with law enforcement on steps that will deter carjackers. Sheriff Dart brought this to my attention. I thank you, Tom. You've always been looking ahead to issues, and this was one that you spoke out on. In January, I wrote to the Department of Transportation and the auto industry to urge the development of uniform standards for swift law enforcement access to vehicle location tracking data in the crucial minutes after a carjacking. If they are more likely to get caught and if there are higher barriers to selling a carjacked vehicle, potential carjackers may think twice. We also need to ensure that local law enforcement has the resources to fight carjacking. The American Rescue Plan, which Congress passed last year, included $350 billion to state and local governments. We made sure that part of the funding went to law enforcement and investing in community violence intervention programs. President Biden's budget request called for significant funding increasing for law enforcement groups like Burn Jag and COPS grants. We must work together across the aisle to get the appropriations bill still pending for this fiscal year, which we're in, across the finish line. I hope we can do that soon, a matter of days. We also need to ensure that President's well-qualified U.S. Attorney and U.S. Marshal nominees are swiftly confirmed. Hard to imagine we have one senator is holding up U.S. attorneys and U.S. marshals on a random basis because of some grievance he has over receiving a letter from the Department of Justice. That isn't fair to law enforcement, and it isn't fair to the communities that they would represent. We need to get to the root causes that would drive a young person to engage in carjacking, preventing trauma and helping kids deal with trauma they've experienced, improving social services, diverting children from criminal justice systems to programs that give them a chance. These kids, as bad as the stories are, came to the earth in the usual way, and their lives took a dramatic turn for the worse, and maybe through no fault of their own. I'm glad Vaughn Bryant from the Metropolitan Family Services in Chicago is here. It's a great organization. He's going to tell us about their efforts. Today, we'll hear from a distinguished panel of witnesses who will talk about government, industry, and community leaders as part of the solution. I turn now to my friend and ranking member, Chuck Grassley.